My fingers shook as I stared at the message, its glow cutting through the sterile gloom of the hospital like a blade. Focus on healing. I'll take care of the house. Just like that. No warmth, no love, just Henry, my husband, sounding more like a business associate than the man who once vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health. I sat there, tethered to an IV pole, my body wrecked from another punishing round of chemo. I couldn't even lift my head without the room spinning. Meanwhile, Henry was out there, miles away, calling the shots on everything I'd built, everything my father entrusted to me. The inheritance I once believed was our anchor in life's chaos, now drifting into his hands. I first met Henry 7 years ago at some overpriced charity gala. He had that disarming, slightly awkward charm, like a lost puppy in a tailored suit. It made him seem sweet, real, unlike the polished, pretentious men circling the room. I was 31, barely a year out of my corporate grind, riding a wave of hope and adrenaline from opening my dream, an intimate art gallery I funded with the money my father left me after his sudden passing. It was grief and grit wrapped into one fragile victory. Henry had strolled up with a crooked tie, gripping a cheap glass of Chardonnay like it was confidence in a cup. He blurted out something awkward about my dress, and instead of rolling my eyes, I laughed. He wasn't like the others, or so I thought. He seemed genuine, at least that's what I told myself. We fell hard and fast, wrapped up in a blur of Sunday brunches and late-night talks about babies and Bali. He told me he believed in me even more than I did, and I clung to that. For a while, I thought we were real. I gave pieces of myself away in increments, first my trust, then my time, and eventually the practical things. He offered to help with gallery invoices, budgets. Said he was good with numbers. I believed him. God, I was so willing to believe him. 2 years in, with a ring on my finger, he pushed to combine everything: accounts, investments, even my inheritance. "It's all ours now, baby," he whispered, brushing his lips on my forehead like a promise. But it was a setup. I just didn't know it yet. Then cancer struck out of the blue. One day it was a nagging headache. The next I was staring up at cold fluorescent lights, being told I had stage 3 lymphoma. Just like that, my whole life spiraled into IV bags and oncologist charts. I was too broken to question anything. When Henry said he'd handle everything, I let him. He was my husband, my partner, the man I thought would shield me, not strip me bare. The first real crack appeared 6 months in. I'd been stuck in that sterile hospital for weeks, bald, gaunt, barely clinging to myself, when I asked about the vacation home my dad left me. "What's going on with the lake house?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He mumbled something about paperwork, looked away. His eyes didn't meet mine. That house was sacred. It was my childhood summers, my father's memory. Soon he stopped showing up at all. Said his work was overwhelming, that I needed rest. But it wasn't rest I needed. It was him. When nurses were nearby, he played his role well. Flowers, smiles, the perfect spouse. But the second they left, his eyes went cold, like I was some burden he was waiting to unload. The truth didn't knock. It slipped in quietly. My nurse Martha, a college friend, caught me crying one night after Henry missed my 3rd chemo session. She hesitated, then said, "Want me to check the property records with you? Just to be sure?" I didn't have the strength to argue. I handed her my laptop with trembling hands. We searched the records, and what we found knocked the breath from my lungs. The lake house gone, sold, transferred. No signature from me, no permission. Just vanished, like it never belonged to me at all. I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest. That house was mine, in my legal name. My father made sure of it. Henry couldn't. He wouldn't, but he did. And that wasn't even the worst of it. My accounts? Drained. My gallery shares? Transferred while I was unconscious in surgery. He was a ghost thief. stealing my life inch by inch while I was too sick to fight. He forged signatures, reset passwords, used the power of attorney I signed during a chemo haze where words sounded like underwater noise. I handed him the keys to everything, and he locked me out. And of course, he wasn't acting solo. Enter Vanessa, his business partner. Blonde, surgically precise, eyes that smiled like glass. I'd met her once. She oozed polite menace. When I finally got my phone back, her face was the first thing I saw. Tagged on Instagram, sun-kissed and smug. Maldives, my dream destination. A promise he once whispered into my hospital bed. And there they were, clinking cocktails over turquoise water in the sunset I was supposed to see beside him, wrapped around each other, laughing, toasting, living a fantasy vacation paid for with the remnants of my suffering. I didn't scream, didn't sob. I just went numb. This wasn't betrayal. It was an execution. My house, my savings, my career, my future, gone. While I clung to life, they danced in the wreckage I built with blood and love. But I didn't die. I fought. I clawed my way back, inch by inch. The doctors called it miraculous. By month 8, the scans were clear. I was officially in remission. My body felt like glass, but my mind? Razor sharp, sharper than it had ever been. I walked out of that hospital with a silent smile, declined the pity visits, and disappeared from the noise. I didn't call Henry. I didn't send a warning. Not yet. This wasn't going to be a screaming match. It would be a strategy. What I needed was silence, time, and evidence. Using the emergency trust fund my father tucked away, the one Henry never knew existed, I hired a private investigator. Discreet, lethal, efficient. In a matter of weeks, I had an arsenal. Photos, phone logs, money trails, Vanessa's over-edited selfies lounging in luxury, forged documents with Henry's sloppy fingerprints all over them. Every file marked, organized, and ready to burn them both down. Every discovery made me smile, not from rage, but with focus. They had underestimated the wrong woman. When Henry finally texted, "Can we talk? I miss you," I played it cool. I agreed to meet at that little cafe where we once dreamed about baby names. He showed up in his usual button-down, eyes darting like prey. His voice trembled under fake warmth. "I'm sorry for everything," he whispered, brushing my hand like we were still us, like he hadn't gutted me and sold off the pieces. I didn't flinch, I didn't speak, and he took my silence as surrender. Poor Henry. He had no clue that silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of a storm building. I'd never been delicate. Not when Mom vanished when I was 10. Not when Dad dropped dead 3 months after walking me down the aisle. Not even when I had to shutter my gallery during the crash. Life had thrown bricks at me before, and I always learned how to build with them. Life had never handed me softness. It gave me scar tissue and silence. But every time I rose, bloodied maybe, but tougher, sharper, unbreakable. Cancer wasn't just an illness. It was an erasure. It stripped me to bones and fear, tried to take my pride, my sanity, my identity, and for a time, it almost did. I turned into a stranger, hairless, frail, curled up in a hospital bed at 3 a.m., surviving on morphine and fragmented memories. But under the ruin, something stayed lit. A flicker, a pilot light. The woman I had always been, the woman Henry pretended to love, until she was inconvenient. We lived in a cozy brick townhouse in Charleston, ivy along the gate, hummingbirds in spring, a little backyard where I once dreamed of building a sunlit art studio. That house was my first act of independence, the first thing I bought with the money Dad left me. I treated it like a garden, nurtured it, made it mine, a place for hope. Henry moved in 6 months after our first kiss. I didn't question it. He was charming, attentive. He made me feel like I mattered. When I talked about growing the gallery, he offered to handle the bills. "So you can stay inspired," he'd say. It felt like support, like teamwork. He was a freelance designer then, hopping between gigs. I never cared about the money gap. I believed in love over ledgers. Dad used to say, character's the only currency that holds. And Henry? He had charm, wit, and what I mistook for integrity. That was enough, for a while. He brought home daisies, made pasta on Sundays, gave me long hugs when deadlines loomed, never yelled, never stormed out. At least, not then. If he resented that I paid the bills, he kept it hidden. Or maybe I just refused to see it. Love doesn't blind you. It sedates you. Love made me stupid. I didn't question the little things, like when he added his name just in case to my emergency savings, or when he started managing rent from my aunt's duplex like it was his. We're a team, babe, he'd say, flashing that easy grin like he was handing me the stars. And me? I was too caught up, too in love, too trusting to see the trap. I mistook convenience for care. Now I remember what I tried not to. How his jaw tightened when I said I'd never sell the lake house. The slight hesitation before he called it our money. Small shifts, almost invisible. A longer than usual look at my bank login. The way his tone changed when I refused to cash out my portfolio for some crypto scheme he swore would set us up forever. I chalked it up to growing pains, marriage stuff, not the warning signs of a man quietly plotting his exit strategy while standing in my shadow. Vanessa slithered into our lives 2 years before my diagnosis. She was strategic, Henry claimed, a branding partner for one of his projects. I met her at a dinner once, tall, manicured to perfection, and laughed like Henry was the funniest man alive. It was performative, too polished to be real. She gave me one of those saccharine smiles, said she adored my gallery and would love to collaborate one day. I didn't hate her, but I felt the static in the room, like her charm had teeth. I shrugged it off. I had a new show opening. We were talking IVF, and chaos already filled the corners of my life. One more uneasy feeling. I buried it. And then came the gut punch. Stage 3 lymphoma. Aggressive. No time to wait. The doctors were clinical. My whole world blurred into hospital walls and time-lapsed fear. I remember sitting there, still in heels, still clutching my planner as the oncologist shattered my timeline, my future, my body, in neat, practiced syllables. Henry sat frozen beside me, his hand in mine but limp, his face unreadable, as if he was already somewhere else. On the drive back, he finally muttered, "We'll fight this together." I nodded, clinging to it like a lifeline, even if it felt hollow. At first, he played the part. Soup deliveries, hand squeezes during infusions, answered calls, picked up groceries. He was decent, present, for a while, but the deeper I sank into the illness, the hair loss, the weight drop, the bone-deep fatigue, the more he checked out, piece by piece. He moved to the guest room. "So you can sleep better," he claimed, but it felt like he was already gone. Late nights became the norm. Excuses rotated. Clients, traffic, workouts. When I pressed for answers, he deflected. When I broke down, he sighed, like I was a chore he never agreed to. And maybe he truly believed I wasn't part of the deal once things got ugly. I think Henry only loved the curated version of me, the one who hosted perfect dinners, paid the bills, made his life look expensive. But when I needed him, the real, raw kind of need, he vanished. Because he wasn't designed to carry anyone but himself. Maybe in his mind, he was cashing in. Finally stepping into the spotlight, he thought I denied him. As if betrayal was just delayed compensation. I've dissected his betrayal like a forensic file. Maybe Vanessa stroked his ego. Maybe she gave him the fantasy of control. Or maybe he was simply tired of faking decency. But his biggest miscalculation? He bet on my death, and that, right there, sealed his fate. Henry and Vanessa didn't just rob me blind, they hijacked my story, my identity. They mistook my illness as permission to erase me. They were bold, reckless. They thought I was too broken to come for them, too weak to claw my life back. So they didn't bother hiding their theft. They sold the house at a loss, fast and quiet. like they couldn't wait to erase my name from the deed. The gallery, my pride and soul, had been gutted and funneled into a fake company. My bank statements were littered with designer jewelry, five-star hotels, and first-class flights I never took. They had morphed into the exact type of parasites we used to roll our eyes at. People who flaunted stolen wealth while stepping over the bodies they buried. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. While my body healed, I began rebuilding something more dangerous. My memory, my clarity, my will. Therapy helped. But writing? Writing was my lifeline. Every night I scribbled like a woman possessed. Passwords, phrases, moments when Henry handed me papers I could barely read through chemo fog. I wasn't documenting to stew in anger. I was creating a blueprint for justice. Gina, the PI I hired, was a former cop, built like a tank and twice as steady. When I told her my story, she didn't blink, just cracked her knuckles and said, "Let's bury them." And bury them we did. Gina unearthed Vanessa's skeleton closet. Turns out she had a pattern. Right place, right inheritance. Twice engaged, both men conveniently passed or liquidated their fortunes. Every time there was money, there was Vanessa. Henry was her latest lottery ticket. I was the terminally ill inconvenience standing in the way of their luxury cruise. But here's the thing, they got cocky. Their paperwork was rushed, signatures laughably inconsistent, and timelines? A legal disaster. And Henry, sweet, arrogant Henry, used my old laptop for multiple transfers, never wiped the history, left us IP logs, timestamps, fingerprints in digital ink. But I didn't strike immediately. I waited. I wanted more than a courtroom win. I wanted emotional carnage. I wanted them to feel like I had, trapped, naked, erased. I quietly reached out to a few old gallery friends, never telling them the full truth, just enough to stir curiosity. I returned to painting, shaky hands and all. Art had always been my oxygen, and with every brushstroke, color returned. Not just to the canvas, but to my soul. I stopped saying why me and started thinking watch me. Not just a cancer survivor, an identity survivor. I rebuilt the woman underneath, the one Henry tried to erase, the one I had muted to keep everyone else comfortable. I had spent years shrinking to fit their expectations. I had forgotten how it felt to be unapologetically visible. As I rose, they faltered. Henry started texting more, feigned concern, lukewarm, checking in. I responded with ghosted indifference and cryptic kindness. I wanted Henry to wallow in not knowing. Vanessa? Her Instagram glow-up dimmed. Her captions got shorter. Her eyes lost their filter. Part of me almost pitied them. Almost. But I had a masterpiece of justice to paint, and this time I held the brush. It started with an envelope, thick, unmarked, delivered just before dawn to Henry's doorstep like a ghost knocking. Inside, receipts, property transfers, wire logs, forgery analysis, IP traces, side-by-side handwriting comparisons. It was an indictment in paper form. At the bottom, scribbled in ink, "I'm not dead," and I remember every single thing. That was the thread. And once I tugged it, the facade unraveled like cheap silk. Within days, Gina dropped tips to every hungry reporter in town. The story? A cancer-stricken woman robbed blind by her husband and his mistress. A scandal soaked in stolen wealth and betrayal. The story caught fire overnight. The local paper blasted the headline, "Cancer patient robbed blind by husband and his mistress." One sentence, and the illusion they built shattered publicly. Just like that, Henry and Vanessa weren't sipping mimosas in curated bliss anymore. They were internet villains now. Stripped bare, dragged into the spotlight, exposed for what they were. The fallout was brutal. Henry's freelance gigs disappeared almost overnight. Clients ghosted him. No one wanted their brand associated with a man trending for betrayal, not brilliance. Vanessa fared no better. Sponsorships gone. Her beauty collab dropped her like dead weight within 2 days. Social media didn't just turn, it erupted. Hashtags trended globally. Inheritance thief. Justice for Emma. Strangers flooded my inbox with solidarity and outrage. Messages poured in. Women from everywhere shared their betrayals, their survival. I lay in bed reading them, eyes brimming, not from pain, but from a strange, quiet kind of gratitude. I wasn't alone. But this wasn't just a digital takedown. The real wreckage? Psychological. Henry began to unravel, and fast. Gina's contacts in fraud enforcement sent quiet updates. His accounts were frozen, subpoenas were flying, and he was under federal scrutiny. The panic came fast. His messages morphed from smug silence to late-night desperation. He begged, pleaded, tried to sound remorseful. "Please, let's talk. I messed up. Emma, you can stop this if you want. I know you still can." Pathetic. And a little too late. Each message cracked his polished persona further. The man who once left me to rot was now drowning. And I felt no guilt, not even a flicker. But the nights? They were still hard. I'd wake drenched in sweat, haunted by chemo echoes and betrayal so raw it pulsed beneath my skin. Sometimes I second-guessed myself. Was I going too far? Should I let it die quietly? But then I'd remember, lying alone, veins burning, staring at ceiling tiles while the man I loved drained my life like it was just another credit line to cash. And still, there was grief. I didn't stop loving him in one blow. I let go in pieces, with every lie, every silence. I grieved a man still breathing, and there's no funeral for that. That kind of mourning doesn't come with rituals. It's the death of a future you planned with someone who turned out to be a stranger. It makes you question every memory, every kiss, every "I love you." Did he ever really love me? Or was I just a well-paved road to the life he thought he deserved? For Henry, the money was just the costume. Without it, his identity collapsed. He'd spent years living off a persona built with my bricks. Without my name, my status, my foundation, he was just Henry. And plain Henry wasn't glamorous. He was petty, brittle, and forgettable. Vanessa tried to do damage control with a weak apology video, vague language, crocodile tears, and half-baked excuses about misunderstanding. The internet devoured her. Comments came in like wildfire. No one bought her act. People saw her, truly saw her, and while they burned, I bloomed. I started holding quiet backyard gatherings, tea, candles, soft music, with women from support groups. We talked, we laughed, we began to heal, together. We told our stories over tea, sometimes laughing, sometimes wiping away tears that didn't ask for permission. I found strength there, not just in their words, but in their eyes. They didn't see a victim. They saw a woman who stood up, shook the dust off, and roared her truth. Tara lost her life savings to an ex who treated poker chips with more care than her heart. Marisol ran from bruises and broken promises, clutching a toddler and a backpack with one broken strap. Yet there we were, in my backyard under flickering string lights and the scent of chamomile, quiet warriors rebuilding something sacred: trust, sisterhood, power. A journalist reached out, big name, glossy platform. At first I said no. I didn't want to be stamped forever by Henry's betrayal. But then it hit me. Telling the truth wasn't weakness. It was power. My terms, my voice, my narrative. So I said yes. I told my story not for pity, but for purpose. My name became more than a headline. It became a lesson, a lighthouse, and a second chance. When the article dropped, the response stunned me. My inbox flooded. Support, praise, offers to reopen my gallery. Artists from every corner of the country wanted in. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was designing a life braver, bolder, louder than anything I had before. Henry, of course, tried to crawl back. His lawyer floated some private deal. I refused. I wanted the world to see every lie in black and white. I didn't want backroom apologies. I wanted sunlight, not for revenge, but for justice. I didn't need to watch him crumble. That was never the goal. I'd already won, because in the end, he didn't destroy me. He freed me. And in that truth, I found a deeper kind of peace. Not from forgetting, but from knowing I stared hell in the face and walked out whole. Scarred, yes, but unshakable. It was a gray, rainy afternoon when everything crystallized, not with drama, but with still, sharp clarity. I sat at my father's old desk, the one he used to write letters on. Now it lived in the corner of my modest apartment, quietly holding history, and me. The window was open just a sliver, letting in the scent of wet pavement and blooming jasmine. I had just reread the article, "The Woman Who Survived Cancer and Betrayal," and took back everything. Seeing my face above that title felt surreal. I studied my own expression, frozen in print. It hit me. This wasn't the finish line. This was the halfway mark. I had spent months unmasking Henry and Vanessa, reclaiming what they stole, dragging their lies into daylight. And in many ways, I had won that war. But revenge, even righteous, has a shelf life. I didn't want to be remembered as just the woman who survived. I wanted to build something bigger, something that reminded women crawling through hell that they weren't alone and that rising is possible. So I chose to rebuild, not just a life, but a purpose. I called Tara, Marisol, and the quiet army of survivors orbiting around the story. We gathered under soft lights in my backyard, breeze rustling the ivy, candles flickering like tiny rebellions. I pitched them an idea, a real nonprofit, one that would offer legal help, safe housing, and tools to rebuild, not just broken finances, but broken spirits, for women betrayed by the men who promised to protect them. We called it Inheritance of Strength. The name came like lightning. They stared at me, eyes wide, the silence thick. Then Marisol leaned forward and whispered, "You mean women like us?" I nodded. No one else. Exactly us. That moment rewrote something inside me. It wasn't just about rebuilding anymore. It was about meaning. For the first time since cancer tried to erase me, I felt fully, deeply, powerfully alive. We didn't waste a second. Tara took charge of the numbers, sharp as a scalpel. Marisol brought her experience in crisis intervention. One of our newest sisters, a grant writer with a gift for persuasion. Within 3 weeks, we had a legal entity, a raw website, and a garden fundraiser lined up. Art, handmade jewelry, even poetry read aloud under lantern light. It was humble. It was magic. What knocked the breath from me was the crowd. Over 200 people showed up, women, men, survivors, strangers, couples holding hands. Some had followed my journey. Some were simply invited by word of mouth. We raised over $1,200 in one evening. It wasn't about the number, it was about the proof. This wasn't a dream anymore. Inheritance of Strength had a pulse. It was real. It was ours. But while I was planting something new, Henry's world was burning to the ground. The fraud investigation? Accelerating. Clients abandoned him. Vendors filed lawsuits. His accounts were frozen, and every asset was under legal scrutiny. Even Vanessa, who once played loyal mistress with glossy lipstick, was now inching backward. Gina, my stone-cold investigator, found a thread of emails between them. Quiet. Damning. Vanessa wrote, "You said this would be simple. Now I'm being subpoenaed for a house I never even set foot in." Henry's reply? "She's doing this just to destroy me." Like I was vengeance incarnate. Like I wasn't just getting my life back. What Henry never got was this. It was never about him. This wasn't a revenge story. It was a reclamation, but part of me, it still wanted to look him in the eye. Not for peace, not for closure, just to see if he could say the truth out loud, even once. So when his attorney requested a closed-door deposition, I agreed. But only if it was recorded and my lawyer was present. No more secrecy. No more hidden deals. He hesitated. Of course he did. But he had no leverage left, and he knew it. We met in a downtown conference room, clinical, fluorescent, soulless, perfectly fitting. Henry shuffled in, looking like sleep hadn't touched him in months. Wrinkled shirt, eyes hollow, temples flecked with gray. He looked nothing like the man who once kissed my forehead and promised me forever. He looked like regret incarnate. But even then, as he sat across from me, I saw it, that last glimmer of entitlement in his eyes. "Emma," he said, soft and familiar, as if the past year had just been a bad dream we could sleep off. I didn't blink. "Let's begin," I said, steady as steel. The first half-hour was procedural. Transfers, bank trails, timelines. Dana, my lawyer, asked the questions with surgical precision. Dana, sharp as glass, never missed a beat. Henry fumbled. Dates slipped. His lies tripped over each other. Then she leaned back, gave me the floor. "Emma has a question," she said calmly. I looked right at him. My hands didn't shake. "When?" I asked. "Did you decide I no longer mattered?" He blinked. "What?" he croaked. "Was it when I got sick? Or was it earlier, when you realized I couldn't stop you from taking everything?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. His fingers twitched like he wanted to escape. Then, for the first time, he told the truth. "I didn't think you'd survive," he said, staring at the table. "And I convinced myself I deserved a future, even if you didn't get one." He said, "Maybe if I moved on fast enough, I wouldn't feel guilty. Like grief had a speed limit. Like I was something to outrun." I let the silence hang there, heavy and sharp like broken glass between us. I stared at him, steady. "You didn't move on, Henry. You calculated. You robbed me while I was fighting for my life. You turned my pain into your playground." He had no comeback, no spin, just shame. Oddly, what bubbled up wasn't rage, it was pity, and that felt like the final nail. Henry gave up everything for a fantasy stitched together with fraud and cowardice, and now that fantasy was collapsing around him, while I, scarred, yes, but standing, solid and whole. As we stepped into the sunlight, Dana glanced over. "You all right?" she asked. I smiled, not politely, proudly. Better than I've ever been. After that, it was like a fuse had been lit. Inheritance of Strength exploded onto the national stage. Letters poured in from women I'd never met, but whose pain I knew like my own. We teamed up with a powerhouse law firm. They offered to take on financial abuse cases pro bono. Then came the TEDx invite. I said yes without hesitation. I stood under the spotlight and opened with, "They stole my inheritance, but they couldn't steal my fire." It went viral. Millions of views, thousands of shares. Meanwhile, I returned to my studio. My hands created resilience in bloom, florals blooming from chaos. Each piece bore the name of a woman in our circle, a tribute, a resurrection. On opening night, I stood back, quietly watching as painting after painting found new homes. They weren't bought out of sympathy, they were bought because they pulsed with power. Henry? He was deep in legal hell, fraud, forgery, frozen assets. Vanessa disappeared, leaving behind subpoenas and shattered reputations. And me? I didn't bother looking back. I had too much ahead of me. I had become the woman I used to pray would show up and save me. Turns out, she was me all along, resilient, unbreakable, no longer burdened by anger but driven by purpose. The scars on my body told part of the story, but my voice, that told the victory. That quiet moment at my father's desk had changed the entire trajectory. I chose not just to survive, I chose to rise. The courtroom was dead quiet, just shuffling papers and the echo of consequences. My hands didn't shake. I'd already fought bigger battles. This was it, the grand finale. Across the room Henry sat, sunken, ghost-like, with a lawyer who looked like even he wanted to escape. Vanessa? She had already flipped, taken a plea deal, and disappeared into legal oblivion. And wasn't that poetic? He betrayed me for her, and she abandoned him the second things got hard. The judge read through the pile. Faked deeds, forged signatures, wire fraud, and the email, that made my blood run cold. He hadn't just stopped loving me. He'd drafted contingency plans for my death, like I was some liability to be offloaded. But there I was, alive, and more powerful than they had ever imagined. As the judge cleared his throat, I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly. "Let go," I whispered. not of justice, but of the hurt that had haunted me for too long. Based on the overwhelming evidence and lack of opposition, the judge's voice rang out. This court finds Mr. Henry Langley guilty of financial fraud, asset misappropriation, and document forgery. The air thickened. Henry didn't blink. He just stared ahead, stone-faced, collapsed inward, not defiant, just defeated. I was awarded everything he stole plus damages. He'd face strict supervision and a brutal financial reckoning. The words were sterile, procedural, but inside me, it rumbled like thunder. It was done. As the room emptied, he stood and met my eyes across the courtroom, haunted, hollow. For a flicker, just a flicker, I saw the man who used to make me laugh at 2 a.m. over burnt pancakes. He approached slowly, alone, cracked wide open. "I don't expect forgiveness," he murmured. "You'd be right not to give it. But I am sorry," he added, voice breaking, "for what I did, and for what I became." I searched his face for a single lie, but found nothing but exhaustion. "You didn't change," I said, quiet but firm. "You just stopped pretending." He flinched but didn't argue. He knew I was right. "Do you hate me?" he whispered. I paused. Hate. That word had lived in me for so long, burning, clawing, breathing. "No," I said at last. "I don't hate you. I pity you." He dropped his gaze, turned, and left. And just like that, I was free. Not partially, completely. The weeks that followed felt like sunrise after a storm. Quiet, golden, calm. One by one, the last legal threads were tied and cut. The first restitution check arrived. I didn't keep a cent. It went straight to inheritance of strength. We grew, 3 new cities, 2 full-time lawyers, and free trauma support for every survivor we reached. We weren't just healing wounds. We were rebuilding legacies. One afternoon at a local art event, a young woman, Kiara, barely 23, walked up to me. Her voice shook. "I read your story," she said. "I thought I was alone, but I'm not." I wrapped her in my arms. "No, baby," I said. "You are never alone again." That night, I wandered my new gallery. Smaller, yes, but deeper, full of soul. I paused before a canvas titled The Rise, a woman rising from deep water, reaching for golden light. That was me. But it was also us all. Every woman who'd been abandoned, drowned, then clawed her way back up. In the days that followed, I felt weightless, like I'd finally stopped carrying the past. I didn't wince at my scars anymore. I saw them and nodded. Survivor's marks. My calendar was no longer built on loss, but on legacy. My days were full. Art, sisterhood, healing. I painted like I was breathing again, and quietly something else bloomed. A man named Eli, steady, soft-spoken, the kind who listens instead of interrupts. He knew my story first, and didn't run. That alone told me everything. He once looked me in the eye and said, "You're the strongest person I've ever met." And I believed him, not as a compliment, but as something undeniable. But more than forgiving him, I forgave myself. For every red flag I ignored, for every year wasted mourning something that was never real. Because survival isn't just about crawling out of the fire, it's about choosing to build a cathedral from the ashes. One evening, I sat on the porch of my quiet home, warm tea in hand, watching the sun melt into molten gold across the horizon. I thought of my father, his voice steady, loving. Legacy isn't what you leave in a bank account. It's what you leave in people's hearts. Henry may have stolen the inheritance tied to my name, but I forged a new one, rooted not in money, but in strength, clarity, and something far more valuable, hope. And in that, I had already won, forever. No court could declare it. No man could take it. It was mine.